Good morning to all. Welcome to another class of this online class. So in this class we will be dealing with the chapter 4 from the paper Signatures, and the title of this chapter is When I Was Growing Up by Nellie Wong. So in the last class we discussed about the major points regarding the biography of this Nellie Wong or the author's details. So in this class we will be going with the poem itself, which is the When I Was Growing Up. So regarding the poet that we discussed in the last class was about the biography of this poet Nellie Wong. So she was from the Oakland, California, and she is regarded as a renowned revolutionary feminist poet and activist who has strived to address the social causes, and her parents were Chinese immigrants. So this is the major point that we have to focus on regarding this poet, who is the Nellie Wong. So she was the Chinese immigrant in America, or the Asian immigrant. So in this poem, this basically is a autobiographical poem. So in this poem, she presents some basic facts regarding her life in different forms of poetry, and the past tense is used to write this poem. So this poem, When I Was Growing Up, is a frequently anthologized poem in educational curriculum, and this autobiographical poem by Nellie Wong highlights the identity crisis experienced by the Asian Americans. And this poem depicts the past of the poet, her early childhood and adolescence, and the narrator, who is an Asian American, is forced to incorporate the dominant white culture and disown that of her own. So this is the situation in which the narrator of this poem is the Asian American, who is the poet itself. She is forced to incorporate the dominant white culture and disown that of her own, and owing to her fear of being discriminated. So this is the basics of this poem, in which she is forced to follow the rules of the Asian American immigrant forms, in which she was basically a Chinese, and she was later moved to America. So the category of her identity, or the she was known by the name the Asian American or the Chinese American immigrant. So this poem is about the identity crisis of this poet. So what is meant by the term identity crisis? So the identity crisis means the questioning of the identity. So here the identity of this poet, who is Nellie Wong, was questioned by the society, entire society during that time. So this is the basics of this poem, in which this poem is regarded as the autobiographical poem, and we all know about the autobiography, the term autobiography, which is writing the details about, or the writing about himself or herself regarding the life experience, events, and all about her life or his life. And in this poem we have the autobiographical in structure, and the form is like a poem. So this is the basic change in which the chapter is become a different thing. So in this poem we have some different levels of categories, and this poem is divided into many stanzas, and at the end of the poem, or the concluding part of the poem, is the self-realization of this poet herself. So ഈ പോയത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്ന പോയത്തിൽ കൂടുതലായിട്ടും ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മെയിനായിട്ട് ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു പോയിന്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ് എന്നൊരു ടോപ്പിക്കാണ്. സോ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ് നമുക്കറിയാം, നമ്മുടെ സ്വന്തമായ ഒരു വ്യക്തിത്വത്തെ ചോദ്യം ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥ ഈ ഐഡന്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ് എന്ന വാക്കുകൊണ്ട് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഇവിടെ നമ്മുടെ പോയറ്റ് നെല്ലി വോങ് എന്നൊരു പോയറ്റ് ചൈനീസ് അമേരിക്കൻ എമിഗ്രൻ്റ് ആണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഏഷ്യൻ അമേരിക്കൻ എമിഗ്രൻ്റ് ആണ്. അപ്പോൾ അവിടെ ചൈനയിൽ നിന്ന് അമേരിക്കയിൽ പോയിട്ട് ജീവിക്കുന്ന ഇവർക്ക് നേരിടേണ്ടി വരുന്ന കുറേ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ, ബേസിക്കലി ബേസ്ഡ് ഓൺ ദിസ് ഐഡന്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ്, ബിക്കോസ് ഷി വാസ് ബേസിക്കലി എ ചൈനീസ് ആൻഡ് ഹെർ സ്കിൻ വാസ് നോട്ട് അറ്റ് ഓൾ ദി വൈറ്റ്, ആൻഡ് ദിസ് വൈറ്റ് ഡോമിനേറ്റഡ് സൊസൈറ്റി വാസ് dominated dominated or put an edge over this category, basically these immigrants from the other countries, especially from the Asian immigrant people. So this is the basics of this poem, and at the end she gets a transition or a great change in which a self-realization affected in her life, in which she know about her identity, and she was very confident about her identity. So ഈ പോയത്തിൻ്റെ അവസാനത്തിൽ പോയം അവസാനിക്കുന്ന എങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ സെൽഫ് റിയലൈസേഷൻ, അതായത് സ്വയമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു വ്യക്തമായ ഒരു ധാരണ, സ്വയമായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നൊരവസ്ഥ, ആ ഒരു അവസ്ഥയിലാണ് ഈ പോയം അവസാനിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഈ പോയം ടോട്ടലി നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ പറ്റും, ഒരു സെൽഫ് ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ് നേരിടുന്ന ഒരു പോയറ്റ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരാളുടെ ഒരു അവസ്ഥ, ഒരു പേഴ്സൻ്റെ അവസ്ഥയാണ് ഈ ഓട്ടോബയോഗ്രഫി പോയത്തിൽ ത്രൂ ഔട്ട് നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്. സോ ദിസ് പോയം is written in the past tense, and the notable aspects of the structure of the poem are the indented stanzas and very little usage of capitalization. So in this poem all the stanzas are divided into many forms, in which the division or the structure of the poem are based on the indented stanzas and the very little usage of capitalization. And the other techniques employed in this poem are the rhetorical questions and imagery and repetition. So we have some forms of imagery and some forms of questions, and also some basically repeating or repetition of the life events or experience of herself. So all these things we can see in this poem. So the title itself, which means when I was growing up, which means that it is about herself. It is an autobiographical poem and about her development or the growth of her life. So this poem is specifically or especially about the development or the growth of her life in a very chronological order or in an autobiographical order. And this is very in this poem the poet used a very simple language and simple point of things in order to convey the message of her life itself and the problems that she faced during in her life during in America, like the basically about the identity crisis on the basically focused on this identity crisis itself. So this is regarding just an outline to this poem. So let's go through the poem itself, which is when I was growing up, in the textbook page number 40 onwards. So when I was growing up is an autobiographical poem which was published in 1973, and in this poem this poem is about the emphasis of this poet, who is Nellie Wong, on the identity crisis experienced by the Asian Americans, and thus it depicts the history of the poet and her family. And this poem is composed in past tense, and the outset of this poem is that the speaker describes her desperation in a society that celebrates white beauty and the major development or major advancement in her growth. And when she grew up, she realized that it was the white people who appeared in movies, magazines, and they were elevated and as the so-called desirable woman. So this is just an introduction to this poem itself. So basically this poem emphasizes or the focuses on the identity crisis experienced by the poet itself, in which the Asian Americans, the group of Asian Americans, and thus it depicts the history of the poet and her family. So this is regarding the introduction to this poem. And in the text, page number 40 onwards, we have the poem itself. So the first line of the poem, the first part of the poem begins from the line, I know now that when I longed to be a white, how you ask, let me tell you the ways. When I was growing up, people told me I was dark, and I believed my own darkness. In the mirror, in my soul, and my narrow vision. So this is regarding just a self-identity or just a description about herself in a very beautiful manner, in a poetic language, in which she says that I know now that once I longed to be a white. So it was her desire in which to become a white person. And how, you ask. So it is a question to the readers in which, let me tell you the ways. So she answers for this question, and in which, when I was growing up, people told me I was dark and I believed my own darkness. So while she was growing up, the people surrounds or the society asked her regarding her beauty or the color of her, and she was dark and she believed her own darkness. So she was very powerful or the very strong in her personality, in which she believed her own darkness because she was dark in nature. And in the mirror, in my soul and my own narrow vision. So all these things in the mirror and in her soul itself, and also in the narrow vision also all this category, she is regarded as a dark person. So firstly, she just described herself as a dark person during that time, while the time of she was growing up. So this is just an answer to the question in which, how you became a dark person, or how you became a strong person in this category or in this identity. So the answer to the question is that she was, when I was growing up, people told me I was dark and I believed my own darkness. So she herself believed in her own mind or mindset, or in her own beauty, which is basically a dark side of her life. So this is the first stanza in this poem. Moving to the second stanza, she continues the poem in which, when I was growing up, my sisters with fair skin got praised for their beauty, and I fell further crushed between high walls. So this is another description about her development or her growth, in which she repeat the line, when I was growing up. So this line is also regarded as the title of this poem. So this line, particularly this line, when I was growing up, is repeating in many ways, or in every stanza of this poem. So in the second stanza, the poet says that, when I was growing up, my sisters with fair skin got praised for their beauty, and I fell further crushed between high walls. So regarding her sisters or her family, her sisters was particularly by comparing to this poet, they were fair in skin, in their skin, and they got praised by others. So about her beauty, or about this poet beauty, she fell in a negative manner, and further like crushed between high walls. So her mindset, or her mind was narrowed into between two walls, or in between between two walls. It means that herself, she was just felt ashamed, or in a negative feeling, in which her sisters was beautiful, or while comparing to her, they were in fair in their skin. And in this poet, or while we focusing on this poet, she was in dark inside. So this is regarding the first two stanzas of this poem. So ആദ്യത്തെ stanzയിലെ poet പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെങ്കിൽ, ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആണ്, മറ്റുള്ളവർ ചോദിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആണ്, എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ഇങ്ങനെയായി, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്തുകൊണ്ട് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഒരു ഇത്രയും സ്ട്രോങ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പേഴ്സൺ ആയി വന്ന് ചോദിക്കുകയാണ്. സോ അതിന് ഉത്തരം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, she was answered to this question by saying that, when I was growing up, the people told me I was dark and I believed in my own darkness, in the mirror, in my soul and my own narrow vision. So ഈ പോയിറ്റ് സ്വയമായിട്ട് പറയുകയാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്വയം വിലയിരുത്താണ്, ഞാൻ വളർന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ കളർ ഡാർക്കായിരുന്നു, എൻ്റെ ഞാൻ നോക്കുന്നിടത്തും അതുപോലെ ഞാൻ കാണുന്നിടത്തും, അതുപോലെ ഇൻ മൈ സോൾ, അതുപോലെ ആളുടെ ഒരു കാഴ്ചപ്പാടിൽ മൊത്തത്തിലും ഒരു ഡാർക്ക് ആയിട്ടാണ് ഈ പോയറ്റ് കണ്ടിരുന്നത്, സെൽഫായിട്ട് കണ്ടിരുന്നത് പറയുന്നു. ഇൻ ദി സെക്കൻഡ് സ്റ്റാൻസ ഇൻ ദി പോയം, ദി പോയറ്റ് സേസ് ദാറ്റ്, when I was growing up, my sisters with a fair skin got praised. അതായത് ഇവരുടെ സിസ്റ്റേഴ്സ്, ഫാമിലി മെമ്പേഴ്സ്, അത് കുറച്ചുകൂടി ബ്യൂട്ടിയുള്ള അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കുറച്ചുകൂടി നല്ല ഫെയറി സ്കിൻസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആൾക്കാർ, ഫ്രണ്ട്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സിസ്റ്റേഴ്സ്, അവരെ കൂടുതലായിട്ട് പ്രൈസ് ചെയ്തു, കുറച്ചുകൂടി അവരെ പൊക്കി പറയും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നല്ല രീതിയിൽ വിലയിരുത്തിയ ആൾക്കാർ. ബട്ട് ഹിയർ വി ഹാവ് ദി പോയറ്റ്സ് മൈൻഡ് സെറ്റ് ഇൻ വിച്ച് ഷീ വാസ് ashamed or she was neglected by others. So this is the regarding the first two stanzas of this poem. In the third stanza of this poem, the poet says that when I was growing up, I read magazines and saw movies, blonde movie star, white skin, sensuous lips, and to be elevated to become a woman, a desirable woman, I began to wear imaginary pale skin. So this is just a dream or desire of this poet herself, in which while she was growing up, she reads magazines, saw movies, and all these in this category, especially in the magazines and also in the movies, she saw the people particularly focused on the white skin. So this is another point of this poem, in which it signifies that how the popular culture in America has cultivated these ideas of beauty by creating a wrong notion of being white. So this is the exact point of view in that time, in which the white American or the white dominated society in America, they made a culture in which a popular culture in America which cultivated these ideas, in which the white persons are the very beautiful persons, or they are good persons, and such other stereotypes. They developed these types of ideas of beauty by creating a wrong notion of being white. So this is the major reason behind this in the third stanza, in which she was growing up. While she was growing up, she saw some movies, magazines, and in all these things, the white persons were celebrated, or white persons were mostly focused, and this was another side of this her neglected life in the while she was growing up. So this is the first most important thing in the third stanza, which is that when she was grew up, she realized that it was the white people who appeared in movies, magazines, and they were elevated as the so-called desirable women. So this is just a form of notion, or a form of design, or the form of framework during that time, in which the white persons or the white celebrities or the white people appeared in the movies, and as well as in the while reading the magazines. All these persons are regarded as the so-called desirable women or desirable people during that time. So this is very sadly, this is a very negative form of culture, in which they only promoted the white dominated society. White dominated society only promoted the white people, or the white celebrities, white forms of everything was based on this white dominated society. So this division or this discrimination during that time made a severe pain in her mindset. So this is regarding in the major points in the third stanza. So ഈ സ്റ്റാൻസയിൽ പറയുന്നതാണെങ്കിൽ, ചെറുപ്പത്തിൽ ഈ പോയിട്ട് ബുക്കും അതുപോലെ സിനിമകളൊക്കെ കാണുമ്പോൾ ഒക്കെ അതിൽ മൊത്തമായിട്ട് അവർ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് വൈറ്റ് പേഴ്സണാലിറ്റീസിനായിരുന്നു. വൈറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കൂടുതലായി അമേരിക്കൻസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആൾക്കാരാണ് കൂടുതൽ ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നത്. സോ ഇത് ഇവരുടെ മനസ്സിലൊരു വലിയൊരു വേദന ഉണ്ടാക്കി എന്ന് പറയുന്നു. Then in the first stanza, when I was growing up, so these lines are repeating again and again, which means the white when I was growing up. And in the first stanza she says that I was proud of my English, my grammar, my spelling, fitting into the group of smart children, smart Chinese children, fitting in, belonging, getting in line. So this is another regarding her studies or her knowledge in the English language, and she said that she was very proud about her English, or in particularly in this poem she says that I was proud of my English, my grammar, and my spelling. So this may be different from the American point of view, American culture, in which she used the English to in her point of view to convey the messages, to convey her ideas to others. So this is particularly different from the American society. So that's why she was very proud of her language, her English. And then my grammar, my spelling, and fitting into the group of smart children, Chinese children. She specifically focused only on the smart Chinese children, in which she thought, or she gave some instructions or some ideas about the English or the study of the English language, in which is applicable only for this category, the Chinese people, Chinese children, fitting in, belonging, getting in line. So she tried to make them, these people, especially the Chinese children, the group of these Chinese children, to study the English in their own way, or their native way, the native way of the Chinese immigrant in America. So this is another important thing, in which in China they only focus on the Chinese language, and they are still struggle to study the English language. So this was the major problem during that time. So she made a simple way to study the English, in which prepared or gave instructions regarding the English language of America with the help of her own language, with the help of this Chinese language. She conveyed all these messages of this language studies, especially on the English language, to her category, especially the Chinese children during that time. So ഇവിടെ പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെങ്കിൽ, ചൈനീസ് എന്നൊരു എമിഗ്രൻ്റ് എന്ന രീതിയിൽ അവർ കൂടുതലായിട്ടും ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്തത് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പഠിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട്, ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി ഒരു ഫോക്കസ് നടത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. സോ ഷി വാസ് പ്രൗഡ് ഓഫ് ഹെർ ഓൺ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ്, her own language, her own grammar, and her own spelling. So ഇവർ ചെയ്തിരുന്നത് എന്താണെങ്കിൽ, ചൈനീസ് ഭാഷയിൽ, അവരുടെ നേറ്റീവ് ഭാഷയിൽ, അവരുടെ നേറ്റീവ് രീതിയിൽ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പഠിപ്പിച്ചു കൊടുക്കുക. അതായത് നമ്മൾ മലയാളത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പഠിക്കുന്ന ഒരു രീതിയിൽ, ഒരു ജസ്റ്റ് എ സിമ്പിൾ ഫോം ഓഫ് ഇൻസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ, ആ രീതിയിൽ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് പഠിക്കുന്ന രീതിയാണ് ഇവിടെ പറയുന്നത്. സോ ഈ ഒറ്റ കാരണത്താൽ അവർ സെൽഫായിട്ടൊരു പ്രൗഡ് മൊമെൻ്റ് ആയിരുന്നു പറയുന്നു. Then in the next stanza, in the 5th stanza of this poem, in the page number 41, we can say that we can see that the line which is the "when I was growing up" is again repeating, in which she says that when I was growing up and went to high school, I discovered the rich white girls, a few yellow girls, their imported cotton dresses, their cashmere sweaters, their curly hair, and I thought that I too should have what these lucky girls had. So while going to the high school, so in the schooling stage of her life, or while the high school education in her life, she says that she narrates some incident in which she was trying to be adapted to the Western language and culture, and she met white girls who wore imported cotton dresses, and thought that she too should have those fortunes. And when she grew up, she longed for the American food and style. So this is just a continuation to the next stanza. So in this stanza, she focuses on the education, high school education, in which she adopted the forms of Western language and culture while she was studying the high school. And she met white girls while she was in school, and who wore the imported cotton dresses. It is very important, in which it was imported cotton dresses, not made up of in their land. So it was made up of they wore the imported cotton dresses, and thought that she too should have these fortunes. So she was a desire about this things, these fortunes, in which to wear a good dress, especially the imported cotton dress during that time, and also to follow their culture. So this is the main points while discussing the 5th stanza in this poem. So in this stanza ഇവിടെ കൂടുതൽ പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെങ്കിൽ, ഒരു ഹൈസ്കൂൾ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത്, സ്കൂളിൽ പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത് അവിടെ കൂടുതലായിട്ട് കണ്ടിരുന്നത് വൈറ്റ് പീപ്പിൾ, അവിടുത്തെ നേറ്റീവ് പേഴ്സൺസ്, അവർ കൂടുതലായിട്ട് ഇമ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്ത കോട്ടൺ ഡ്രസ്സസ് ധരിച്ചിട്ടാണ് വന്നിരുന്നേ പറഞ്ഞു. സോ ഇത് അവരുടെ ഒരു ആഗ്രഹമായിരുന്നു, അവർക്ക് അതേപോലെ നടക്കാം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവർക്ക് അതേപോലത്തെ ഒരു വിധി ഉണ്ടാവണം എന്നൊരു ആഗ്രഹം ഇവർക്കുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. സോ ദിസ് ഇസ് ദി the desire of her during the her high school education time. So in the next stanza, in the sixth stanza, the poet says that when I was growing up, again repeating, I hungered for American food, American styles, coded white, and even to me, a child born of Chinese parents, being Chinese, was feeling foreign, was limiting, was un-American. So this is another important thing in this poem, in which the word hungered. So hungered means the intensity of her desire to imitate the American white's lifestyle. Hunger എന്ന വാക്കുകൊണ്ട് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് അനുകരിക്കുക, അമേരിക്കൻ ലൈഫ് സ്റ്റൈലിൽ അനുകരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥ. സോ ഇവിടെ പറയുന്ന തുടക്കത്തിൽ പറയുന്നത്, when I was growing up, I hungered for American food, American styles, coded white, and even to me, a child born of Chinese parents. So here ഫസ്റ്റ് തുടക്കത്തിൽ പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെങ്കിൽ, she longed for the American food and style. So she was അവരുടെ ആഗ്രഹം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് കൂടുതലായിട്ടും അമേരിക്കൻ ഫുഡ്, അമേരിക്കൻ സ്റ്റൈലിലായിട്ട് ഫോളോ ചെയ്ത് പോകണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹമായിരുന്നു. Then the white, and even to me, a child born of Chinese parents, being Chinese, was feeling foreign. So this is just a self description about the poet herself, in which a child born of Chinese parents, being Chinese, was feeling foreign, in which she was she was at the America during that time, while she was educated in the high school, and was limiting, was an un-American. So this is another reality in which she was basically an Chinese, and she was brought up in America, and the mindset of her was to become a American, or to follow or to imitate the lifestyle and food of everything of the American style. And also the reality is that she was basically an un-American. So ഒരു ഇമിഗ്രൻ്റ് അനുഭവിക്കുന്ന ഏറ്റവും വലിയൊരു പ്രശ്നമാണ് പറയുന്നത്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ചൈനയിൽ ചൈനീസിൽ വന്ന് ഇവിടെ അമേരിക്കയിൽ ബ്രോട്ടപ്പ് ചെയ്ത് വന്ന ഒരു പേഴ്സണാലിറ്റി എന്ന രീതിക്ക്, ഒരു പേഴ്സൺ എന്ന രീതിക്ക് അവർക്ക് അനുഭവിക്കുന്ന ഒരു പ്രധാന ഒരു പ്രശ്നം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, അവർ സ്റ്റിൽ ലേബിൾഡ് ആസ് എ അൺ-അമേരിക്കൻ പേഴ്സൺ, ആൻഡ് ഷീ വാസ് very interested to follow the American lifestyles and cultures. So this is regarding her desires, and the reality is that she was recognized as a un-American person, because she was basically a Chinese immigrant in America. So she was an Asian American immigrant in America. So this is regarding the sixth stanza of this poem. We are moving to the next stanza, which is the seventh stanza of this poem, which is when I was growing up and a white man wanted to take me out, I thought I was special, an exotic gardenia, anxious to fit the stereotype of the Oriental chick. So this is another important thing, in which lifestyle of the America, in which she began to hate the yellow man. She felt ashamed of being with them, and their acts were considered as cultureless. So this is regarding in the seventh stanza of this poem, in which she herself hated the yellow man, especially the category of this Chinese itself, in which she wanted to make she wanted to consider herself as a American person, like a white American person. So she began to hate the yellow man, and she felt ashamed of being with them, especially being with these Chinese Americans, and their acts were considered as cultureless. And when she grew up, people would ask about her nationality, and this made the identity crisis in her. So this is the theme or the basic of this poem, in which the identity crisis of herself, in which while she was grew up, people would ask about her nationality, and that made the identity crisis, or this made the major difference between her lifestyle or her life in a nutshell. So this is regarding the first seventh stanza in this poem. So in the first stanza we discussed about her self reality, self-realization, in which she was dark when she was growing up. I was dark and I believed my own darkness. So she realized her darkness in the first stanza. Moving to the second stanza, we discussed about the other sisters of her family, in which they were basically fair in skin. So their skin was more beautiful than her, this poet. So it made any other complex, inferiority complex in her mindset. And then in the third stanza, she again says about the white people, white dominated society, in which all the people, all the celebrities, all the persons in the films and as well as in the writing on the magazines, all were basically the white people. So it became another inferiority complex in her, in which she basically began to hate the yellow skin of their basically the yellow skin denotes the skin of these Chinese immigrant Americans. And in the next stanza, in the fourth stanza, we discussed about the language, English language, in which she studied or she instructed the English language in her own native style. It was very proud, in which she gave some messages or some instructions to her Chinese children, especially Chinese children, in order to study the English language. Then in the fifth stanza we discussed about the high school education, in which she while she was growing up, she discovered the rich white girls, fellow yellow girls, who wore the imported cotton clothes, imported cotton dresses. So it was her desire to wear something like this, which is the imported cotton dresses. So it was her desire regarding in this stanza. In the next stanza, we discussed about the term hungered, which is very important term in this poem, which means the intensity of her desire to imitate the American white style. So this is very important, in which it is just like a desire or her identity in which to follow or to imitate the American white lifestyle. അമേരിക്കയിലെ ആ വൈറ്റ് ലൈഫ് സ്റ്റൈലിനെ പിന്തുടരുന്ന ഇമിറ്റേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥയാണ് അവർക്ക് ആ സമയത്ത് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥ. അവരുടെ മൈൻഡ് സെറ്റ് അങ്ങനെയായിരുന്നു. സോ ഇതാണ് ഈ ഹങ്ങേർഡ് എന്ന വാക്കുകൊണ്ട് ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ദ വേർഡ് ഹങ്ങേർഡ് ഷോസ് ദി ഇൻറ്റൻസിറ്റി of her desire to imitate the American white lifestyle. Then she followed the American food or the American styles, especially she said that she was a child born of Chinese parents, and being Chinese was feeling foreign. Her feelings was just like a foreign thing, in which particularly her feelings, all her thoughts was like a American person, and it was limited because she was basically an un-American. So this is a very pathetic reality regarding her life, in which she was particularly was an un-American, and she was brought up in America and basically a Chinese immigrant in America. So this is regarding the last stanza. And in the seventh stanza we discussed about her mindset about the yellow man, in which she began to hate the yellow man, and she felt ashamed of being with them, and their acts were considered as cultureless. So she herself considered the the yellow man as the cultureless people, and when she grew up, the people would ask about her nationality, and this made all the difference, in which it began to it was the beginning of her identity crisis in America. So this is the just a discussion about the first 7 stanzas of this poem, When I Was Growing Up, by Nellie Wong. And this is very we can say that this is very autobiographical in nature, and she tells her life experiences and also also the events in her life in a chronological order, in which what are her mindsets, what are the changes, or what are her desires. All these things comes in every stanzas, and her intent desire was to become or to imitate the American white lifestyle. But it in the following lines we can say that they question the society questions herself, basically the identity of her, in which she was not at all a American, she was a Chinese immigrant. So this is the reality or the identity crisis which she faced during her lifetime. So this is regarding the first 7 stanzas of this poem. So we discuss the next stanzas in the next class. So go through all these lines in the textbook, page number 14 and to 41 and 42, and go through all the lines. And this is very simple in nature, and which is written in past tense, and all the stanzas are divided into different categories, and it conveys different messages or different ideas, and go through all this. So we will meet in the next class. Thank you. Happy learning.